Right then, well, let's go on to the core presentation itself. Talk about 7 wonders of advisor technology. There's lots of debate that we had internally about which ones to pick out, and I guess we assumed that some of the basics are being done well within your firms, and so we wanted to look at how the stuff that we can layer on top of that. So we're going to talk about a little bit about the financial planning tools and calculators out there and how we're seeing those move on. We're going to talk about how the overall world joins together and is connected. We couldn't do a presentation on the 7 wonders without talking about social media. It's a topic that's changing so rapidly as well that we thought it very much worth including that. We're going to talk not just about the technology using the advice process, but some practical things that people are doing with technology about supporting remote working, and then extending that remote working to the clients as well, to offering remote propositions. We'll come back and talk about the digital world, and as Keith's going to touch on that with real-world examples as well. And then at the end, we're going to touch on personal data management and look at some of the initiatives happening in the marketplace around that as well. But starting with those tools and calculators, I think the reason why we wanted to start here is this is the area that we're seeing the big growth in the market and use of technology. It's an area that if we look at the market in various different surveys, this is a survey from Investment Trends, which is saying that 82% of advisors now are looking or investing in this area. But it's an area that you don't have to go that far back to see things like cash flow planning tools not being used in any great means. Certainly pre-RDR, it was a much smaller, more niche type business. If there were very few systems that supported you in the world, then there was probably truth. And if you took truth, then you were probably buying into a whole way of working, changing your whole business around it. It wasn't something you just took on lightly, so it became almost a cult following rather than just a tool that you could be used in the mainstream world. Otherwise, you built your own spreadsheets. There weren't that many offerings around at that time. Even if you look at risk profiling questionnaires, before the FCA started poking at the risk profiling questionnaires, that was still quite niche. It was people using Phenometrica that were quite intellectual and wanted to get really into the psychometric profiling of the clients and were prepared to sit down and ask 40, 50 questions with the clients to go through to it. It wasn't really in the mainstream back then. And so we really have seen this really grow consistently over the last few years, and probably not least because clients like it. Clients think that now we're moving away from flogging product and we're actually doing proper financial planning because we're using these tools. And at the same time, we're beginning to find ways to extend services, and mainstream financial advice has been able to do some things that maybe were out of reach to them before that. Importantly, as we start using tools here, we're now getting this consistency of advice going as well. And I think it doesn't matter whether you're a large national or a small IFA, there are some real benefits of that consistency. I remember not that long ago sitting down with one of the largest brands in financial advice and asking them how they approach risk profiling, and they had 5 definitions of risk profile, and they weren't particularly well worded. They were, this person's prepared to take some risk and various vague terms like that, and their advisors would choose from that list of 5 words. Now they had 2,500 advisors, and they couldn't be consistent across that. But it doesn't matter whether you're a large company or a small company. If you're a one-man band and someone's coming in, it's important that you've got a way of not just giving consistent assessment of risk, but that you can actually prove to anyone that asks you that you have been consistent with that. And obviously that's led to a huge rise and uptake in risk profiling. One of the other areas I think that drives people to use these tools is they're trying to get really professional output for their clients. Does anyone know Dennis Hall from Yellowtail? So he does a lot of media work. You may come across him based out at Liverpool Street, I think, or Bank. I once interviewed him for Asset TV, and what he was saying was the reason why he was using Morningstar was the reason why he did it, and the sole reason he did it was for his output to be as professional as the large institutions. And that's what he was getting out of that. I think things have moved on since I had those conversations with him, because now I think people don't just want the professional output, they want it personalised and flexible to their own firm. So they want to capture the essence of their firm and put that in professional looking output, but not lose their individuality of their own advice. And that's something that the tools are now allowing people to do. The other change since those days is people no longer want a standalone tool in these different areas. So I think we have seen a rise of more cash flow planning tools, more stochastic modeling tools, more risk profiling tools. But what that's actually meant is people have fragmented their advice process, and that integration of those different solutions is getting very disjointed. So we are seeing people looking for more integrated solutions as well. And that leads me on to the second wonder of our world, which is about the connected world. And I've very much talked about here how the world's got to be connected. But before we get past that, I don't want to leave the last point, which is we need a connected world in our own firms first. So, you know, I was talking to one firm that because of these disparate systems they've got, in an advice journey, they keyed in the name and address of a client 21 times. Now, I say that to some people, and they go, what, only 21 times? We do it more than that. But the inefficiencies of that are quite huge, but also the potential for error is quite huge if you've got that level of rekeying. So first we need to connect our own systems together, but once we've connected our systems together, we can then go out to the rest of the world. Now, clients is an obvious one that people are starting to talk about, and we'll hear more about how that's done with Keith in a really good case study. But making content available to have the conversations with your clients is step one. But now we're seeing people saying, well, I don't just want to share data and information with my clients. I've actually got professional advisors, accountants practice, lawyers that I want to share information with. So I actually want my same portals that I'm giving a view onto my systems to actually be made available to my partners, but only the right people and with the right level of security to make sure they can't see what they can't see. And maybe it's not even a professional advisor, maybe it's an introducer portal, particularly maybe in the protection world where you've got estate agencies that you want to link up to. So we're seeing all these different people wanting access to a core hub of systems. The other one I always think is worth talking about and has had an interesting history is how distributors and the providers are now beginning to share information. You know, if we look at getting valuations on policies and how that's changed over the time. I mean, it's been for many years that you could have what we call a contract inquiry service. You want to update a policy information before you go out and see the client. You could go electronically to the provider and update your policy information. But that was on demand. You would press the button, it would go off and get that information. In the digital world, that doesn't really wash because actually the information needs to be updated all the time anyway. So the providers have been looking at moving their systems to a more real-time method of updating things. So we had bulk inquiry that came along. Now, some of the product providers haven't yet got there because their systems are older, but certainly the new platforms will give you a download of data every morning to refresh your systems. So if your clients are having access to the information, it's current. It's a fundamental building block of having that online information. But that hasn't been enough for people because now we're wanting to see that we're seeing these systems that are standing in here able to do quite complex portfolio reports, portfolio analysis, CGT calculations. That needs more data. That needs transactional information. So the feeds are getting richer from the product providers to feed the distributors. Now, not all of the product providers are providing that. So if that's something you want, talk to your key product providers. Tell Standard Life you want to be driving more transactional data down to your systems so you can do that sort of information. Tell them that you now want to be trading electronically with them, straight through processing. You know, people like AXA are certainly moving that way. So, you know, I think more and more servicing of information can be done electronically online. And it's about getting your processes more efficient by connecting to these people. It's about, you know, doing that and removing the rekeying of data and doing it in a secure and auditable way. And with doing that, we're really moving our lives forward. So if we're connecting to different people, there are different ways that people are wanting to connect, and one of the key ones is social media. Now, some people dismiss social media almost as something that maybe it's for the younger generations and it's the next generations coming up. Same with digital. I actually think the stats don't show that, either with online access to information or social media. You don't actually split by age. So if I look at the stats around age group or accessing online financial advice, I think it's about 50% for those under 24, and it's 48% for those over 55. It doesn't split by age. What it does split by, interestingly, is by value of the client. The private, so those earning 20,000 are around 47% going online. Those over 60,000 in earnings are about 71%. So the split is less about age and more about value of the client bank that's actually going on. So I think it's dangerous to dismiss social media as part of the younger generation. What social media is doing, though, is not just changing how we communicate with the clients, it's also changing how clients consume information generally. So people now want information graphically often, in bite-sized chunks, and speed of information from multiple sources is something that is being looked at all the time. The different social media sites out there are huge, and no one's going to do all of them, and I don't think that's at all possible. If we look at the reach of some of these social media sites, then I think it is substantial. Now, and some of them, these things are becoming more and more instant and sharing more and more information instantaneously. So, you know, Twitter now has Periscope that it's acquired, that is sharing video instantaneously. It's sharing moments of your life as they happen, as is Instagram. Now, what I would say, though, is let's not get too caught up in the hype and think that we can do too much selling directly over this. Social media should be about conversation, about building a relationship, rather than just flogging product again. I linked in with somebody that was a financial advisor the other day, and the first thing they did was offer me a financial review. I haven't built a relationship with them yet. It's kind of like the wrong way around here. What you want to do with your Twitter feeds and stuff is you become part of their community. So when they want to come to financial advice, they'll come to you. The social media should be about listening to your clients. CRM systems now often monitor the social media. So before you go out and see your client, you can look them up on your CRM system. It'll give you the latest post, and you can have a conversation icebreaker when you first go and see them. You know, how you're just back from holiday, or you know, your daughter's just done her A-levels, whatever. There's actually a really interesting case study in one of our clients in Australia, who, by listening on social media, found a very tragic event had happened to one of his clients, that his daughter had got leukemia. He proactively went to the daughter and said, don't worry, you look after your daughter, I'll sort the financial implications out of this, we've got you covered with your policies, I'll kick off the process to get that in place, you focus on your family. And in the service world that we now exist, those sort of service opportunities are really, really key. So I think of social media as conversation and listening above all. The other thing to be careful about, if you don't think of it that way, is the regulatory risk. So, you know, the FCA will see this as promotion. They will see the individual post as promotion, not just if you've linked it to the website and there's further information on the website, that doesn't count. They'll look at the tweet or the Facebook post, not the totality of the conversation. So, you know, if you're moving into hard sell on the social media, not only do I not think it's necessarily right for the medium, but you've also got to be careful from a regulatory point of view. But this does give us reach. It does extend who we can talk to. It does help with your brand, and it can also be about partnering and knowledge sharing. Again, a slight caveat to that. One of the things I do see, particularly with Twitter in the industry, is Twitter is used a lot by IFAs to talk to other IFAs, and then they think they've got a social media policy for growing their business. We need to not just talk to people like ourselves, we need to talk to our clients via social media if we really want to drive it forward. So do think beyond your own social network and how you can actually reach out further and spread that connectivity and reach. Okay, I want to change direction. We talked a lot about sort of the advice process and client engagement. I think we also need to think about what technology can do for us in changing our daily lives. And I think remote working is a big part of that. How many people work from home in the room here? Yes, it's quite a large percentage of people. And I think that is increasing time and time again. And it's because we've got things like cloud-based software. Now, cloud-based software means many different things to different people. To some people, it's, you know, very publicly open, Dropbox and things. Other people, it'll be SaaS-based solutions like Salesforce. Other people will be a singly hosted solution that you can dial in. It doesn't really matter, but having software that is accessible via a browser from different locations is actually enabling different working patterns, which is absolutely key. You've also got different specialist collaboration software. We use one internally called Jive, where we share and we build documents together. We also use it for it's our own little social media site as well. And they really help people that are remote still feel part of a community. And that's why we're seeing this big growth. When we think 4.2 people working remotely, that's huge, and the growth is huge as well. And the reason why people are doing this more and more is, A, it keeps the employees themselves like it, but it actually gives us access to new different employment sectors that maybe we didn't get access to before, and it's efficient. Now, some of the journeys into London can be horrendous. Journeys around where I live in the Midlands, you can spend an hour getting into work, and that time travel, time savings that you can get is obviously key to any business case. But that remote working doesn't just sit as an internal aspect. I think where it gets really exciting is we then spread that to a remote proposition, and we start looking at how we can connect to our clients remotely. And clients have been doing this with online banking for ages. They've been quite happy not to go into a branch. I haven't been into a bank branch for years. I use First Direct and have done for 25 years, and I get my service that way. So people are quite prepared to remotely communicate with people, and I'm not doing it on the internet. I'm phoning up the call center for advice. Same access, though, to the same data that they have in the same system, whether I'm phoning them or I'm going in online. And the reason why people are using that is, one, it gets the client engagement, but it also gets the geographical reach. If we go back to some of the things we were talking about, social media, and some of the things I'll come on to on digital channels, that's not geography bound. So you're going to be, by nature of doing some of those activities, making contact with people. Does anyone follow Meaningful Money or seen any of the webinars by Meaningful Money? Yeah, Pete Matthews really does some really good educational material that he puts out there on financial services and engages really well with his audience. He lives in Penzance. Now, it makes his videos great. His videos are often on the harbour wall in some Cornish fishing village, or on the beach, or somewhere like that. Really engaging style to them. He's even been in his car in the car park with the wind whistling past him. But when he's engaging with clients and then has to give the advice to him, he has to do that remotely. So he uses Skype or WebEx or GoToMeeting to connect with those clients, and he's servicing people all over the country from Penzance. And that's also quite convenient for clients. Clients like that. It's also about engaging clients in a way that they want to be engaged. So when I first started working with Focus that I mentioned before, we were working with, I think it was General Accident. They may have been CGNU, or they went through various name changes at that point. And they were trying to use digital TV to engage with the female population that they perceived didn't want an advisor into their house in the evenings to see them. So by coming through a digital mechanism, they were less threatening and more able to tap into a different market sector. Another Australian example, in Australia, in Sydney, the cab drivers were getting about 50 grand Aussie dollars a year working the cabs in Sydney, and suddenly the mining boom happens. They can go and drive a lorry out in the wilds off Perth for $200,000. So they go out there and they live out in the sticks. They've got lots of money, not a lot to spend it on out there, and they need financial advice. But the advisors aren't going to travel for 4 hours out to wherever they're living by the mine. So they were starting to engage them remotely with technology, screen sharing technology on the CRM systems, the financial planning systems, so that they could share those with them. Interestingly, where the take-up for those systems came was started off on those remote locations, but came right back to Sydney and to Melbourne, where time-short people working in offices didn't want to get out of and walk down the street and go to a few blocks up the road. They wanted to be able to dial in and speak to their advisor and save their time. So even though it was designed originally for those remote servicing, it's actually having a very real relevance to the lives of those based in the city. So on to the big topic of the digital world, and we'll talk more about this with Keith, but I've broken it into 4 different areas here on the digital world. The first area around websites, and I guess that itself is probably 2 different areas. There's the static website, which I think is a hygiene factor now. People don't believe you're real unless you have a website these days. But then there's slightly more interactive type calculators and tools that you can get on those websites. And those have been around for many, many years. I think you then start moving into the world of private client portals. And this is where you can start sharing data and information securely with the client. Normally, the first thing that drives people here is to give the client the ability to dial in and see their portfolio up to date if you've got the right links to the product providers in place. It actually quickly moves on to the benefit that this is a communication mechanism. So this is where you share documents, you leave a copy of the fact find, you put the suitability report up, you have your secure email with your client, your conversation with your client. I think where it starts getting powerful is that it's tightly integrated to your CRM and back office systems. You tie them into your workflows too. So when they do some activity on there, maybe they fill in a remote fact find, you're notified that that's been filled in and that you can then take that to the next stage of your advice process. I think there's a very logical then flow onto the self-service type capabilities, maybe doing some of the simple executions yourself. And then the debate, I think, comes to robo-advice and where you get some actual automated assistance going as well. The power of all of this is that, you know, it's reach 24 hours a day, it's convenient there, and it's also about brand. The challenge and the opportunity is, as this is a cost reduction process, what proposition do you put this around? So I see people talking about this is a premium service. They want to offer their premium clients that are paying extra money. They're going to give them the private portals. They can get online access. They're going to maybe extend those capabilities to give them a few calculators and tools, integrate it to banks, etc. It's a real gold-plated service. At the other end of the market, I see people saying, actually, I don't want to deal with the bottom 30% of my client bank at the moment. I need a quick and automated way of dealing with them. And they're giving this to the bottom end of the market. There's no right or wrong answer, but you do need to think about what it's targeted to and add the functionality into the to meet that target model. But what I do think is key is this middle point here. If you are going down the digital route and you are also offering other services as well, people expect them to be seamless. As I said, I go onto online and maybe look for something on my First Direct account. If I phone up to ask for some more details about something, or I want to know, chase down what a particular charge was, I phone on. I expect them to be looking at the same information as I'm looking at. If I have a financial advisor come out and see me, I would expect them to know that I was added in the detail to the fact find the night before. People want one integrated system, and that's not even like synced every 24 hours, every 12 hours. They want it up to date in real time. So, because typically, if I've done something online, I might phone up there and then expect them to see the same information. And I think, for some reason, in our industry, we forget that a lot. The other thing that is worth mentioning in the digital world is not just about your systems, it's about the other systems. We are now in a world where we do go to peer review sites. I never book a holiday without going on TripAdvisor now. I always look at it. Even when I was looking at a financial advisor, I went on Trusted Advisor and I looked there at the reviews that we're getting. So I do think you need to bear in the peer-to-peer review sites as well. My final topic I want to talk about was personal data management. And this is getting maybe a little bit more into the future of some of the things that are happening, but it's things that are coming down at us that we need to be aware. And I just wanted to talk about a couple of initiatives. The first is the gov.uk verify coverage. So this is also, often talked about as digital passports. And this is, if you go on, I lost my passport, sadly, just before I was due to go to my German mother-in-law's 60th wedding anniversary, actually, so I couldn't get over there. Very convenient. If you go on to renew anything like that, you will be given a digital passport, your passcode that you can then use on all the government sites. Now that digital passport is now getting quite widely, about 80% of the population now using it, plan to get to 90%. We now see businesses starting to talk to the government about using that. Tizer now doing work with them and piloting some work in that area to look at it in financial services. Some of the big corporates like Barclays are looking at it. So looking at ways that they can use that to open accounts, to set up accounts, log on to accounts, using the same security checks that have been done by the government and saving time and money on their side. So I think that's something very relevant that we need to look at when we're talking about personal data. The other initiatives that I think we need to think about are the pensions dashboard. So the FCA and the government started talking more about the pensions dashboard. Netherlands is the one that's always held up as the country that's really nailed that, but I think Sweden have done it as well, where you can log on to a central site and get all your pensions information. Now that's quite an interesting dynamic because at the moment, the place they come to consolidate the financial information is typically the financial advisor. So if you're going to now get the pensions information from there, we need to make sure that if you are putting your data online and you are that source of truth for them, it's more than just pensions. You're adding in all the other assets, that they've got all the other financial world into one place. You need to be making sure that it's your brand, your advice, your love, your care that's wrapped around that, that's differentiating it. They're not, we're losing the value of just going to get portfolio information. So I think we need to watch and track the progress of the pensions dashboard. It's not going to be here tomorrow. It's going to take a little while to come through. So I think that gives us the time to make sure that our positioning as an industry is very clear, and this actually dovetails into it rather than competes with it. Ultimately, though, I don't think personal data management is that new. When I go back 25 years, I used Microsoft Money to keep my information and log what was happening. You had to manually type in every single transaction, and it was horrendous, and therefore nobody used it for more than about 2 or 3 months. But now we can get that data flowing in seamlessly from other systems. It's a great way to actually help clients look at the money and understand the money. It's a great way for them to keep information up to date and present it to you and help you know your client through very dynamic ways and without rekeying of data. So really, I think personal data management is coming back onto the agenda in a way that it hasn't been for a long time. Watch the pensions dashboard stuff, look at the work that the government's doing in this space, because I think it will tie in very nicely as we go through the next few years. And that was it, really. That's my sort of guide through. I think hopefully you can see that there's a little bit there that I think we've seen the momentum towards some of the changes. I think the digital world is something that's very much there, and we're seeing some people having a braver go into that world. I don't think it conflicts with the current advice models. I think it augments them, but there's one person better than any to talk about that, and I guess that would be